I am picking up my granddaughter from school and she climbs into the car with this look on her face. Not sad, not angry, just flat, empty, like someone turned off a light inside her. She is 15. I ask her how her day was and she shrugs. I ask if something happened and she says no. Then, after a long silence that stretches for 3 blocks, she says something that has been rattling around in my head ever since. She looks out the window at the rain and says, "Grandpa, does it ever feel like nothing you do actually matters?" I am George, and I am 87 years old. I have lived through wars, recessions, family tragedies, and personal failures I wouldn't wish on anyone. And that question from my granddaughter? It shook me, because I have asked myself that same question more times than I can count. The difference is, I am at the end of my life looking back, and she is at the beginning looking forward. And somewhere between those two perspectives, I think I finally understand something important. We are terrified of being invisible. We live in a world obsessed with impact. Everyone wants to leave their mark, change the world, be remembered. I see it everywhere. People chase careers they think will make them significant. They post online hoping for validation. They measure their worth by how many people know their name. And I get it, I really do. When you are 15 or 25 or even 50, you feel this crushing pressure to be exceptional. If you aren't disrupting an industry or gaining 1 million followers, the world tells you that you are failing. My granddaughter feels small because she is measuring herself against a skyline that is impossible to climb. She thinks mattering is about size. She thinks it is about volume. But here is what I have learned after nearly 9 decades on this planet. The things that actually matter rarely feel like they matter at the time. In fact, real significance usually looks incredibly boring. It looks invisible. And if you don't know how to look for it, you will miss your own life while you are busy trying to build a legacy. Let me tell you about my neighbor, Margaret. She lived 3 houses down from us for 42 years. Margaret was a school teacher. She never married. She had no children of her own. She taught 3rd grade at the same elementary school for her entire career. To the outside world, her life looked small. It looked contained. She drove a beige sedan. She tended her garden on Saturdays. She went to church on Sundays. She graded papers on weeknights. When she retired, there was a small gathering in the school gymnasium. Maybe 30 people showed up. No cameras, no speeches that would be remembered. She got a plaque and a bouquet of flowers. She ate a piece of cake, smiled that quiet smile of hers, and went home. If you looked at Margaret's life through the lens my granddaughter uses, the lens of impact, you would say she didn't do much. You would say she lived a nice, quiet, insignificant life. You would be wrong. 2 years after that retirement party, Margaret passed away quietly in her sleep. I remember getting the call. I put on my black suit, the one that fits a little looser every year, and I drove to the funeral home. I expected a modest turnout, maybe the same 30 people who came to the retirement party. Margaret had always been private, unassuming. She wasn't a mayor, she wasn't a CEO, she was just a neighbor. But when I turned onto the street of the church, I had to hit the brakes. There were cars parked on the grass, cars parked 3 blocks down. I walked up to the church doors and I couldn't get in. It was standing room only. There were people spilling out onto the steps, men in expensive suits, women holding babies, teenagers looking awkward in ties, hundreds of them. The air in that room was heavy, not with polite sadness, but with a deep, vibrating gratitude. I squeezed into the back row, confused. I thought, did I miss something? Was Margaret secretly famous? And then the service started, and one by one people stood up to speak. And what I heard over the next hour completely dismantled everything I thought I knew about what it means to leave a legacy. A prominent doctor stood up, a man who saves lives every day. And he was shaking. He said, "Margaret was the first person who made me feel smart.
He talked about being a dyslexic 8-year-old who everyone had written off, and how Margaret stayed after school every single day for 6 months to help him read. Then a woman stood up. She ran a massive non-profit in the city. She said, "Margaret was the only safe place I had when my parents were getting divorced." Story after story, lives changed, directions altered, all because of a woman who thought she was just doing her job. Margaret never tried to change the world. She never sought recognition, but the ripples from her life were a tsunami.
We think we know what mattering looks like. We think it looks like a stage. But Margaret taught me that it actually looks like a seed. You plant it, and you never see the tree. But I have realized something even more terrifying than missing your own legacy. It is the realization that you might be walking past the most important moments of your life right now, ignoring them because they don't look special. I almost made that mistake when I was 39 years old. I was sitting in a car in the rain, just like I am now, about to make a decision that would have destroyed my family. And the only thing that stopped me was a cup of coffee. When I was 39, I hit a wall. My business was bleeding money. I was fighting with my wife constantly. I was drinking more than I should have been, sleeping less than I needed, and I felt like a total failure. One Tuesday evening, I was sitting in my car outside a bar, staring at the flashing neon sign, trying to decide whether to go in and drown the noise in my head. I was on the edge of a cliff and I was ready to jump. I had convinced myself that my family would be better off without me, that I was just a burden. Then, a knock on the window, it made me jump. I rolled it down, expecting a police officer or a beggar. It was a guy I barely knew, named Tom. We had met maybe twice at a community fundraiser. He didn't know I was in crisis. He didn't know my business was collapsing. He just saw me sitting there. He smiled and said, "Hey, George, I am heading to the diner to get some coffee and pie. Do you want to join me?"
I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him to leave me alone so I could ruin my life in peace. But something in his voice, so normal, so casual, made me open the door, just like that. No intervention, no lecture, just coffee. We sat in a red vinyl booth for 2 hours. Tom didn't ask me what was wrong. He didn't try to fix me. He just talked about normal things. He talked about his kids' soccer games. He talked about a book he was reading on the Civil War. He talked about a fishing trip he took years ago. And somehow, in the middle of that completely ordinary conversation, the storm inside me settled. The darkness that had been screaming in my ear for weeks suddenly went quiet. I looked at this man, eating cherry pie and talking about bait, and I remembered that life was still happening. I remembered that there was a world outside of my own failure. I didn't go into that bar. I went home, I kissed my wife, I slept for 8 hours. That night could have been the end of my marriage. It could have been the start of an addiction that killed me. Instead, it was just a Tuesday. Tom probably forgot about it by the next morning. He probably has no idea that he saved a man's life just by asking him to eat pie. That is the thing about mattering. It almost never announces itself. You won't get a notification on your phone telling you that you just changed a trajectory. Most of the time, you will never know. You will just be decent to someone and you will move on thinking it didn't amount to anything. But it does. It sticks. It echoes. And sometimes, looking back, you realize that the most inefficient things you did were actually the most valuable. This brings me to my wife, Elena. If Tom saved me with a cup of coffee, Elena saved everyone else with a pen. She understood something about mattering that I didn't figure out until she was gone. She knew that in a world obsessed with speed, the only way to show love is to slow down. Elena was a writer, not a famous one. She wrote letters, real letters with stamps and ink and her terrible, messy cursive. She would write to our kids when they were away at college.
She would write to old friends she hadn't seen in 20 years. She would write to cousins, neighbors, the mailman. I used to tease her about it constantly. I was the practical one. I would say, "Elena, we have phones now. Just call them. It takes 3 minutes. Writing that letter took you an hour."
She would just smile at me, lick the envelope and say, "George, nobody keeps a phone call in a shoebox." I didn't understand what she meant. I thought she was wasting time. I thought she was being old-fashioned. But after she passed away 3 years ago, I had the terrible job of cleaning out her office. And that is when I found the evidence. I found 3 large boxes in the back of her closet. They were full of letters people had written back to her. Hundreds of them.
I sat on the floor and read them. And in almost every single one, the person wrote something like, "I have kept your letter on my nightstand for a year," or "I read your words every time I feel lonely," or "You have no idea how much it meant that you took the time." I sat there crying, surrounded by all this paper. I realized I had been wrong. A text message is efficient. A letter is a sacrifice. A letter says, "I gave you my time and I can't get it back." People don't feel loved by your efficiency. They feel loved by your sacrifice. Elena mattered enormously, not because she reached millions, but because she reached deep. She left a paper trail of love that weighs more than any digital footprint ever could, but sometimes words aren't enough. Sometimes even a letter is too much noise. Sometimes to really save someone, you don't need to say a single thing. You just need to endure something with them. Mattering is quieter than we think. It is personal. It is knowing that your presence changes the temperature of a room, even if you don't say a word. When my grandson was 7 years old, he was terrified of water. He wouldn't go near a pool. If we tried to bring him to the beach, he would scream. His parents tried everything. They tried bribing him with ice cream. They tried scolding him. They tried throwing him in, hoping he would figure it out. Nothing worked. His fear was absolute. One summer, I decided to try something else. I put on my trunks, walked into the backyard pool, and stood in the shallow end. I didn't call him. I didn't splash. I didn't hold out a toy. I just stood there, waist deep in the water, looking at the trees. He watched me from the patio, clutching his towel like a shield. I stayed there for 15 minutes. Then I got out, dried off, and went inside without saying a word about swimming. The next day, I did it again. 15 minutes, just standing, being calm, being safe. On the third day, he came to the edge of the pool and sat down, dangling his feet in the water. I didn't celebrate. I didn't say, "Good job." I just nodded at him and kept watching the trees. By the second week, he was standing on the steps next to me. By the end of August, he was swimming laps. He is 23 now. He probably doesn't remember those 15-minute sessions. He probably thinks he just got over it. But I remember. I know that if I hadn't been there, patient, steady, unmoving, his fear might have become his identity. I didn't fix him with a speech. I fixed him by being a silent witness to his fear. I let him borrow my calm until he could build his own. That is mattering. Not because it is impressive, but because it is real. The older I get, the more I realize that most of what we are chasing is smoke. We chase status, we chase achievements, but people forget your accomplishments faster than you would believe. They don't forget how you made them feel. They don't forget that you showed up. They don't forget that you saw them when they felt invisible. Those things stick. They echo forward in ways you will never fully understand. Being a witness is hard work because it requires you to slow down when the world is telling you to speed up. I was at the grocery store last week. The line was long. The fluorescent lights were humming. Everyone was checking their watches, tapping their feet, annoyed. The young woman at the checkout counter looked exhausted. She had dark circles under her eyes. She was moving slowly, scanning items with a robotic, heavy motion. I could have just paid and left. That would have been the efficient thing to do. But I stopped. I looked her in the eye and asked, "How are you holding up?" She gave me the automatic answer. "I'm fine." I didn't move. I waited a beat and said, "No, really, how are you doing?" She looked surprised. She stopped scanning. Her eyes filled up with tears. She told me she had been working double shifts because her mother was sick in the hospital and they needed the money. We talked for maybe 3 minutes. The people behind me were sighing. I didn't care. I told her she was doing something honorable. I told her that her mother was lucky to have a daughter like her. When I left, she thanked me twice. Will that conversation change the world? No. Did it fix her mother? No. But did it matter to her in that moment? I think it did. For 3 minutes, she wasn't a machine. She was a human being who was seen. So here is my answer to my granddaughter, and maybe to you. Yes, what you do matters, but probably not in the ways you think. It matters in the small moments, the unglamorous ones, the ones you won't post about or put on a resume. It matters when you choose patience over anger, when you tell the truth even when lying is easier, when you help someone even though no one is watching, when you stay when leaving would be simpler. Your life doesn't have to be a spectacle to matter. It just has to be honest. It has to be present. It has to be kind. But there is a trap here, a trap that catches almost everyone in their 40s and 50s. We spend our entire lives building one list of virtues only to realize at the funeral that we should have been building a completely different list. There is a concept I read about once that changed how I see everything. It is the difference between resume virtues and eulogy virtues. The resume virtues are the things you bring to the marketplace, your skills, your degrees, your job titles, your earnings. We spend our entire lives polishing these. We go to school for 20 years to build them. We work 80-hour weeks to improve them. We think these are the things that make us matter. But the eulogy virtues are different. These are the things people talk about at your funeral. Were you kind? Were you brave? Were you loyal? Did you listen? Did you love well? Nobody stands up at a funeral and says, "He was amazing at optimizing supply chains," or "She had a fantastic quarterly return in 1998. Nobody cares. They talk about who you were when the work was done. The tragedy of modern life is that we spend all our energy on the resume virtues, but deep down, we want to be remembered for the eulogy virtues. We want to be loved, but we spend all our time trying to be impressive. And being impressive is a lonely business. It is a game you can never truly win because there is always someone richer, someone faster, someone younger. I am 87. I don't have many years left. And when I think about what I want my life to have meant, I don't think about the business I ran. I don't think about the awards on my shelf. They are just dust collectors now. I think about the coffee with Tom. I think about the letters from Elena. I think about the 15 minutes in the pool with my grandson. I think about the checkout girl who needed someone to see her. Those are the things that mattered. Those are the things that will outlast me. So I look at my granddaughter in the passenger seat. She is still looking out the window, waiting for an answer, waiting for me to tell her how to be important, how to be big. And I realize that the best thing I can do for her is to tell her the truth. I reach over and put my hand on her shoulder. She looks at me. I say, "Sweetheart, I have a secret for you. You don't have to save the world to matter. You just have to save the moment you are in." She frowns, confused. I continue. You matter when you listen to your friend who is crying. You matter when you do your homework honestly. You matter when you are kind to your brother, even when he is annoying. You matter right now, sitting in this car, just because you are here. I can see her shoulders drop. I can see the tension leaving her body, because the pressure to be extraordinary is crushing her. And giving her permission to be ordinary, to be human, is the greatest gift I can give her. We need to stop telling our children to change the world and start telling them to love their neighbors. Because if everyone loved their neighbors, the world would change on its own. So, to you watching this, maybe you feel small. Maybe you feel like your life is just a series of waking up, going to work and going to sleep. Maybe you feel like you haven't done anything. I want you to know that you are wrong. The fabric of society is held together by people like you, people who show up, people who care, people who do the unglamorous work of being decent. You want to know if you matter? Look at the people directly in front of you. Are you present with them? Are you honest? Are you kind when you don't have to be? Do you keep your promises? Do you make room for other people's pain? Do you celebrate their joy? These questions won't land you on magazine covers. They won't build your platform or expand your influence, but they will determine whether your life actually meant something. I am George. I am 87, and I am telling you before it is too late, stop trying to build a legacy. Just build a life, one small, honest moment at a time. If any of this landed with you, I would appreciate it if you shared this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment and let me know one small thing you are going to pay more attention to, and subscribe if you want more of these conversations. I have a bit more to say before I am done, and I would like to say it to people who actually want to listen.